There is a dog chained at the edge of the world, and every ancient poem that mentions him also mentions that the chain is going to break. Not might break, not could break, under certain conditions, if matters unfold a particular way. The chain is going to break. The poets knew it. The gods knew it. Even Garmr, the hound himself, crouched in his cave at the threshold of the realm of the dead, knew it. And still he stayed. Still he waited. Still, somewhere in the ancient darkness of Gnipahellir, he pulled against the iron until his collar wore the fur from his neck, and the blood dried black on his chest, and the howling echoed off stone walls that had heard it so many times they could almost have howled it back. Here is what most retellings of Norse mythology never stop to ask. Why does a creature this powerful stay? Garmr is named in the Grimnismal, one of the oldest poems in the Poetic Edda, as the greatest of all hounds, the exemplar of his kind. He is to dogs what Odin is to gods, what Yggdrasil is to trees. The greatest, and the greatest of all hounds is the one they chain at the gate to the underworld, who howls in the dark and waits for the world to end. Tonight, we are going to find out why. And at the end of this story, you will discover something about who Garmr is actually guarding against. And the answer is not what any version of this myth has told you before. That specific, quietly devastating answer is what we are here for. Hold that question. Settle in now. Let the day go wherever it's going without you. The lights are low. The world outside can manage itself for a little while. You are here, and there is nowhere else to be. This is the story of Garmr, the Hound of Hell's Gate. You might come to Norse mythology through Odin's ravens, or Thor's hammer, or the great wolf Fenrir who is chained beneath the earth. You might know Loki's schemes, or Freya's tears, the world tree Yggdrasil with its roots drinking from 3 wells, the rainbow bridge Bifrost that burns at the end of all things. Norse mythology is not short on memorable figures. Garmr is not one of them. Not in the popular imagination, anyway. And yet the poems know him. They name him with reverence. They return to him again and again, not as a detail, not as background texture, but as a refrain. The single recurring image that marks each stage of the world's unraveling. In the Völuspá, the great prophetic poem of the Poetic Edda, the howl of Garmr before Gnipahellir is the line that divides one age from the next. The Fimbulwinter, the great cold before the end. The breaking of the divine order. The final battle on the plain of Yggdrasil. Each threshold in the apocalypse is announced not by trumpet, not by the voice of a god, not by a sign in the sky, by the howling of a hound chained at the mouth of a cave. Think about what that means. The Norse poets, composing these lines somewhere around the year 1000 CE, drawing on oral traditions, far older than any written source we have, chose a sound, a dog's howl, to measure the approach of the end of everything. Not a vision, not a proclamation. A sound that tells you everything is changing without being able to tell you exactly when. The Grimnismal's declaration is worth pausing over. It places Garmr in a list of supreme exemplars. The best tree, the best ship, the best of gods, the best of horses, the best of bridges, the best of skalds, the best of hawks, and Garmr of hounds. In that list, he sits alongside Odin and Yggdrasil. He is not peripheral. He is exemplary. He is the highest expression of what a hound can be. And then that supreme being is chained in a cave. This is the first thing you need to hold in mind as this story unfolds, because it becomes important in a way that takes the full length of the myth to understand. We will return to it. Keep it there, in the part of your mind still listening. To understand Garmr, you need to understand where he lives. Gnipahellir. It comes from Old Norse words meaning something like the overhanging cliff cave, or simply the cave at the brink, the cave at the edge, the cave that looks out over the road that leads down into everything the living cannot follow. Gnipahellir sits at the entrance to hell, not the hell of medieval Christian imagination, not a realm of punishment and fire and divine retribution, but something older and quieter, and in its own way, far more unsettling. Hell was where most people went. The average Viking Age Norseman did not expect to die in battle. He expected to die in a bed, or of sickness, or of old age, or of cold, or of any of the ordinary catastrophes that end a human life. And when he died that way, he went to hell. Hell was ruled by the goddess of the same name, daughter of Loki and the giantess Angrboda, sister of Fenrir and the world serpent Jörmungandr. The prose Edda describes her as half alive and half dead, her body divided, one side the color of living flesh, and one side black as a corpse. She was appointed by Odin to receive the dead who came to her, and she received them without cruelty, without judgment, without the elaborate moral accounting that later Christian sources tried to project onto her. You went to hell because you died. That was the only qualification required. Snorri Sturluson, writing in the 13th century and almost certainly influenced by Christian ideas of the afterlife, painted Hell's Hall in aggressively gloomy colors. He named her serving dish hunger and her knife famine, and her bed illness and her door's threshold stumbling block. Modern scholars are largely skeptical that this reflects genuine Viking Age belief. The original pagan understanding of hell appears to have been closer to a continuation of ordinary existence in a different place. The dead ate and slept and existed as they had before, simply in hell rather than Midgard. A transition of address, not a punishment. But the journey, there was formidable. The Hellvega, the Hell Road, ran north and downward through dark valleys for 9 days and nights. The traveler would eventually reach the river Jöl, whose name means loud noise, spanned by the bridge Jalarbru, roofed in gold, guarded by the giantess Modgudr, who questioned all who crossed. Beyond the bridge lay the fence surrounding hell itself, Nagrinda, the corpse fence. And beyond that fence lay the realm. And before the fence at the cave called Gnipahellir, chained to the rock and stained with blood, lay Garmr. This is where he has always been. This is where he will always be, until the chain breaks. The sources give us very little detail about what Garmr actually looks like. This is worth noting on its own. The Norse sources are characteristically sparse with physical description, especially of underworld beings. What we have, we mostly owe to a striking encounter recorded in the poem Baldur's Draumar, Baldur's Dreams. The poem begins before the death of Baldur, the most beloved of the gods. Odin's son has been dreaming of his own death, and those dreams have shaken the entire divine order. Odin, unwilling to accept what any seer could already tell him, saddles his 8-legged horse Sleipnir and rides down into Niflhel to seek a Völva, a prophetess, who might tell him what is coming. And on the way, he meets the Hound. The poem describes it this way: bloody he was on his breast before. The Hound came from hell. It howled at Odin from a distance, and it went on howling for a long time. Odin rode forward, the earth resounding under Sleipnir's hooves until he reached the Hall of Hell. That detail, bloody on his breast, is almost everything we have. The chest stained dark with old blood. Not the blood of Garmr's own wounds, blood that has been there a long time. But here is the question that the sources never quite answer, and that I am asking you to hold until the final section of this story, because it changes the meaning of everything you are about to hear. Whose blood is it? And more importantly, what exactly is this creature guarding against? The standard answer is, he keeps the dead in and the living out. But what if that is only half the story? Keep that question. It will be answered. Scholars have noted that the hound in Baldr's drama is unnamed, and that identifying him with Garmr requires inference rather than proof. The texts do not explicitly make the connection. The picture that emerges from the scattered sources is compelling precisely because of its gaps. He is the dog in one poem, the hound in another, the greatest of all hounds in a third. He is assembled from fragments. And still the picture resolves. Something waits at the entrance to the realm of the dead. Something chained, bloodstained, and howling. And when Odin rode past it on Sleipnir, the all-knowing king of the gods did not stop. He rode forward. Even Odin was not eager to linger at the threshold of death. Here is what most retellings of Garmr always leave out, because it complicates the clean picture of a single monstrous guardian. The sources cannot agree on what kind of creature he is. The Grimnismal calls him hundr, the Old Norse word for dog. A domestic animal, or at minimum a canine in the most general sense. But in the Völuspá, the word used for Garmr in the refrain is freki, a word that translates much more readily as wolf, and notably, it is the name of one of Odin's 2 wolves that sit at his feet in Valhalla. 2 of the primary sources. 2 different Old Norse words. Not a transcription error, visible in the surviving manuscripts and driving a persistent debate among Norse scholars. The question it raises is deceptively simple. Is Garmr the same being as Fenrir? Scholar E.O.G. Tervil Petre, in his 1964 study, Myth and Religion of the North, was among the first to formally note the similarities between Garmr and Fenrir. Both chained, both associated with apocalyptic release, both connected to the forces of chaos and death. Andy Orchard pushed the argument further. In his Castle's Dictionary of Norse Myth and Legend, he theorizes that Garmr, Skirl, and Hati were originally all simply Fenrir, that Snorri Sturluson, when compiling the Prose Edda in the early 13th century, carefully distinguished between creatures that earlier oral tradition had experienced as multiple expressions of a single archetype. Orchard's observation is pointed. Snorri is careful to name the wolves who devour the sun and moon as Skirl and Hati, and to describe an encounter between Garmr and Tyr at Ragnarök, which raises an interesting problem. Tyr was the god who placed his hand in Fenrir's jaws. Fenrir bit it off. If vengeance drives these final battles, and the Norse understood vengeance as a sacred obligation, then you would expect Tyr to fight Fenrir. Instead, he fights Garmr, and each becomes the other's slayer. John Lindo of the University of California, Berkeley, notes that the question of Garmr's identity remains genuinely unresolved. There are good reasons to read him as a distinct figure. He has a specific location, a specific role, a specific adversary, and good reasons to read him as a variant of the same deep archetype that generates Fenrir. What we can say with confidence, regardless of whether Garmr and Fenrir are one creature or 2, they express the same essential idea. A bound canine at the edge of the ordered world, a chain that will break, a howl that means the boundary is about to fail. And that idea, the bound chaotic thing at the threshold, is far older than the Norse texts that contain it. The Völuspá, the prophecy of the seeress, is the greatest surviving poem of the Norse poetic tradition. It is narrated by a völva, a female seer, summoned by Odin from her death sleep to tell him what she knows of the past and the future. She describes the creation of the world, its peopling and corruption, and finally its destruction in Ragnarök, the fate of the gods. And throughout that description, one refrain appears, not once, 3 times, each time marking a new stage in the collapse of everything. Geir nu Garmr mjök fer Gnipahellir, Festa mun slitna en freki renna. In Henry Adams' Bellows translation, now Garm howls loud before Gnipahellir. The fetters will burst, and the wolf run free. After the first occurrence, the Fimbul winter begins. 3 consecutive winters with no summer between them, the great cold that heralds the end. After the second, the Jotun, the giants, invade the world of the gods. After the third, the last time the refrain sounds, the poem turns and describes a new world rising from the ruins of the old. The scholars who study Völuspá have noted something remarkable about this structural choice. The poem was composed in Iceland around the year 1000 CE, almost certainly drawing on older, oral sources at a moment when the Norse people could feel their world changing around them, Christianity arriving from the south, the old ways shifting under its pressure. And the poet, anonymous, working in the ancient Fornadisrak meter with its heavy alliteration, its drum beat of consonants, chose a sound, specifically a howl, to measure the approach of the apocalypse. Not a vision, a sound. The G sounds in Gaia nu Garmr fall like footsteps, like a howl that does not end so much as echo. The poet understood that sound carries weight that images cannot. Garmr's howl is not described in the poem. It is produced, rhythmically, structurally, in the poem itself. You hear it as you read. You hear it as you listen. Imagine what that experience was like for the original audience. These were not people reading in silence. The Völuspá was performed. The Völva's voice would rise to that refrain, and every listener would know it was coming back. Each time it returned, the world was further gone. The howl before the cliff cave was the pulse of the apocalypse, a rhythm, a countdown that everyone in the room already knew the end of. This is the detail that tends to stay with people, the one that surfaces unexpectedly, days later, when you're doing something ordinary and your mind produces the image. A cave, darkness, a bloodstained shape at the threshold, and a sound that means the world is ending by degrees. Norse cosmology contains a remarkable structural principle, one that scholars including Lindo have identified as constitutively distinctive of how the Norse universe was understood to operate. The gods do not eliminate their existential threats. They postpone them. Loki is bound under a mountain, serpent dripping venom onto his face, until Ragnarök. The world serpent Jörmungandr is hurled into the ocean, where it grows until it can encircle all of Midgard. Hell is cast into Niflheim to rule the dead. And Garmr is chained at Gnipahellir, greatest of all hounds, kept from the world behind iron and stone, his howling the only evidence of what the gods have put away rather than put down. The prose Edda raises the question directly. Why didn't the gods simply kill Fenrir rather than binding him with an unbreakable chain? The answer given in the text, that the sanctuary of Asgard was too sacred to be defiled with the wolf's blood, strikes most scholars as a rationalization invented to explain a theological reality the text cannot quite articulate. What that reality appears to be, and what Lindo and others have suggested as the more persuasive explanation, is this. The Norse theological imagination was structured around the concept of the bound threat, rather than the eliminated one. In this cosmology, chaos cannot be destroyed. It can only be contained for a while. The threat is not outside the divine order, and never was. It is woven into the divine order, chained at its threshold, circling in its oceans, waiting in its caves. Every chain in Norse mythology is a testament to this understanding. Every chain is also a countdown. Not if it breaks. When? And Garmr's chain is no different. He is chained at the gate of the dead, not because the gods believe the chain will hold forever, but because, as the pattern of the mythology consistently implies, The chain holding long enough is the best outcome they can manage. This is not despair. The Norse tradition is remarkably unsentimental about this. The gods know the chain will break. They chain Garmr anyway. They build Valhalla anyway, filling it with the greatest warriors who ever lived, so they will be ready when Ragnarök comes. Preparation without hope of prevention. Courage in the full knowledge of how the story ends. That is a very Norse idea, and Garmr, pulling against his chain in the dark, embodies it perfectly. When the chain breaks and the refrain sounds for the last time, Garmr does not run toward any particular destruction. He runs toward Tyr, or rather, and the distinction matters here, Tyr runs toward Garmr. Tyr is the one-handed god of law, justice, and honorable war. His name derives from the Proto-Germanic Tiwaz, which in turn derives from the Proto-Indo-European Dewos, meaning celestial one, or simply God. The same root gives us Zeus and Jupiter. Tyr's name literally means God. By the time of the surviving Norse texts, he had been displaced from whatever prominence he once held. Odin had absorbed his function as chief of the divine order. Thor had absorbed his role as warrior god. Tyr appears diminished, one-handed, playing a supporting role in the myth of Fenrir's binding and waiting, across all of time for his appointment with the Hound. Here is what the Prose Edda says about that appointment. Then shall the dog Garmr be loosed, which is bound before Gnipahellir. He is the most evil creature. He shall do battle with Tyr, and each shall become the other's. Slayer. The most evil creature. Snorri does not apply that phrase to Fenrir, does not apply it to Jörmungandr. He applies it to the hound at the cave, the greatest hound, the most evil creature. The paradox is deliberate, even if Snorri did not consciously recognize it as such. Tyr faces Garmr because he is the god of law, of order, of the proper boundaries between things. And Garmr is the guardian of the boundary between the living and the dead. Two figures of the threshold, one serving the order of the living world, one serving the order of the underworld, meeting at the moment when all boundaries collapse. Each kills the other. There is no victory in this meeting. That is the Norse point. Odin is swallowed by Fenrir. Thor kills the world serpent and then dies of its venom, walking 9 steps before he falls. Freyr fights Surtur the fire giant without his sword. He had given it away for love, and dies for it. The gods go to the final battle knowing the names of the Skarn, things that will kill them. They go anyway. Tyr goes to meet Garmr because that is what the god of law does. He meets his doom with his one remaining hand and an intact sense of what is owed. The idea that a monstrous hound guards the boundary between the living and the dead is not unique to Norse mythology. It may represent one of the oldest recurring concepts in the human mythological imagination. The most famous parallel is Cerberus, the multi-headed hound of Greek mythology, who guards the entrance to Hades. He prevents the dead from leaving, and more importantly in the myths that feature him, prevents the living from entering uninvited. The heroes who find ways past Cerberus, Heracles who drags him into the daylight, Orpheus who lulls him with music, are doing something extraordinary precisely because Cerberus represents an ordinarily absolute boundary. Bruce Lincoln, in his 1991 work, Death, War, and Sacrifice, Studies in Ideology and Practice, proposed a linguistic link between Cerberus and Garmr, arguing that both names might derive from a Proto-Indo-European root, *ger**, meaning to growl. If Lincoln's argument held, Cerberus and Garmr would be etymological cousins, a shared name as fossil of a concept that predates both Greek and Norse civilization by thousands of years. However, The classicist Daniel Ogden has noted that Lincoln's argument actually requires the two names to be derived from two different Indo-European roots, undermining the case for a direct linguistic relationship. The Dutch linguist Robert Beeks dismissed the hypothesis entirely as unfounded speculation. The scholarly debate about etymology remains genuinely unresolved. What is less contested is the broader pattern that exists regardless of linguistic ancestry. In Vedic mythology, the god Yama, ruler of the dead, is accompanied by two four-eyed hounds named Shama and Sharvara, described in the Rig Veda as messengers patrolling the earth for those whose time has come. In the Zoroastrian tradition, a dog guards the bridge of judgment that the dead must cross. Albanian folklore preserves a three-headed dog that guards the underworld and never sleeps. In Low German and Dutch tradition, Garmr echoes forward into a figure called the hellhound, the hellhound, or in the dialect of Twente in the eastern Netherlands, the Cardos, described with red glowing eyes, his howl a warning of illness and death. These figures, even where they cannot be proven to share a single linguistic origin, share a structure. A large and terrible dog, a threshold between living and dead, a guardian who cannot be reasoned with. That structure is old, older than any surviving text. It appears to represent something the human mind has been doing for a very long time, placing a guardian at the boundary of death, giving shape and form to the unthinkable crossing that awaits everyone. Garmr is the Norse expression of that shape, the most local, most specific version of a concept so deep and widespread that it may touch something close to a universal experience of imagining what lies at the edge of the living world. Before we can fully understand what Garmr meant to a Viking Age audience, we need to step back from cosmology for a moment and think about something more ordinary. What dogs meant to the Norse people who told these stories. Dogs were everywhere in Viking Age Scandinavia. They worked, herding, hunting, guarding. But they were also companions in a way that went beyond function. Archaeological evidence from across the Norse world reveals dogs buried with their owners, not as objects, not as grave goods in the way that weapons or jewelry were grave goods, but as companions. At the Oseberg ship burial in Norway, dating to around 834 CE, 6 dogs were found among the sacrificed animals, their presence interpreted not as mere provision for the journey, but as a reflection of genuine relationships between the living and their animals. In 2025, Norwegian archaeologists excavating a boat grave on the island of Senja above the Arctic Circle found a Viking woman buried with a small dog placed carefully at her feet. The archaeologist leading the excavation noted that the dog appeared to have been placed with real care, not thrown in, not positioned arbitrarily, but settled at the woman's feet as if sleeping. The people who buried her 1,000 years ago wanted her dog to be with her. Archaeologist Håkon Ryerson of the University of Stavanger has written about how dogs are the animals most frequently found in Iron Age graves in northern Norway, companions in life and in the journey afterward. That understanding, the dog as a being whose loyalty extended even past death, is the cultural soil in which the figure of Garmr grew. Here is what this means for the myth. Garmr is not simply a monster the Norse invented to fill a narrative slot. He is the supreme expression of a creature the Norse people genuinely loved and genuinely feared. A dog could be a companion, a dog could be a guardian, and a dog at the right threshold, in the right place, under the right conditions, could be the thing that held the boundary between the living and the dead in place. The Norse did not think this was strange. They thought it was natural. Of course, the underworld would have a guardian. Of course, that guardian would be a hound. What else would you put at that door? This is the moment I've been pointing toward since the first paragraph. This is where the questions that have that have been waiting. Whose blood is on his chest? What is he guarding against? Why does the greatest of all hounds stand at a cave instead of ranging freely across a world worthy of his excellence? Finally come together. Here is what most versions of the Garmr myth always leave out. The hound at the gate is not guarding the living from the dead. He is guarding the dead from the living. Think about that for a moment. The gate of hell is not designed to keep the dead from escaping. The dead in Norse cosmology do not particularly want to escape. They simply are. They exist in hell as they existed in life, continuing an existence that is ordinary and permanent. They do not press at the gates. They do not hunger for return. It is the living who cannot be trusted at that boundary. Odin himself rides to the gates in Baldr's Drauma, seeking knowledge he should not have. Hermodr rides Sleipnir to Hel's Hall to plead for his brother Baldr's return. The living keep arriving, demanding exceptions, seeking information, trying to unmake what has been made. And Garmr is there, bloodstained and howling, not precisely to prevent them, since some do cross, but to mark the threshold, to make it real, to be the thing that announces, here the rules change. Here you are leaving your world behind. Here whatever you bring back will not be what it was. He is the guardian of the fact of death, not of death itself, not of the dead, but of the reality that death is a boundary that changes everything on both sides of it. And here, this is the thing that has been waiting at the center of the myth all along. Garmr is also bound, not just in the practical sense of the chain at Gnipahellir, bound by his nature, by his role, by the function he has been given in the architecture of the cosmos. He is the greatest of all hounds, and he spends eternity at a gate, howling into the dark, unable to follow anyone he watches arrive. He cannot enter the realm he guards. He cannot leave the cave where he is chained. He endures the constancy of the position so that the boundary itself can exist as a real thing rather than a vague idea. This is the deepest thing about him, and the thing the myth encodes without ever saying aloud. There is something in that which goes beyond mythology, something that touches the actual experience of grief, of being the one who remains when someone you love crosses a boundary you cannot cross, of watching a departure you cannot follow, of staying at the threshold after the door has closed, not from malice, not from failure, from the nature of what you are and where you have been placed. The ancient Norse people understood that death was a threshold with a guardian. They buried their dogs with their owners because even the most loyal companion eventually reaches a boundary they cannot cross together. They told the story of Garmr because every one of them knew what it was to be on one side of a door that someone else had gone through. The greatest of all hounds stands at the gate, not the monster, the grief that stays behind. The story is finished now, or rather, it has reached the place where such stories do not so much end as settle, like the moment after a howl fades and the cave goes quiet, like the stillness before the next one begins. There is a hound at the edge of the world, chained at the threshold of the dead, the greatest of his kind, and he is howling in the dark for everyone who has ever stood at a door that closed and not known what to do with the remaining side of it, for every creature of loyalty at a boundary it cannot cross. He has been there for 1,000 years of telling. The chain will break. He knows it. He howls anyway. That is what it means to be bound at a threshold. That is the thing the Norse poets understood that no simpler version of this story can hold. Let it settle now. Let the cave go dark. The world outside this moment will still be there in the morning, with all its ordinary demands and its ordinary gifts. You don't have to carry any of this. The best of it will find you when it's ready. A few days from now, perhaps, when a dog howls somewhere at the edge of your hearing and you'll think, for just a moment, the threshold, the chain, the one who stays. If this story found you at the right hour, if it gave you something to carry or something to set down, consider subscribing to Sleepable Mythology. There are more of these waiting, more guardians and gods and forgotten figures from the oldest corners of human memory, more truths wrapped in myth, patient as a hound at a cave, waiting to be heard. Good night.